A salary is the drug they give you when they want you to forget about your dreams. Because it's very easy to stay in that world where somebody is mitigating your risk. You just have to perform certain tasks, do them well for a third of your day, and they will feed you a salary.
You are now tuned into another episode of Being Africa Live right here on Discover Music Channel by Playmass.today. And today we are taking a break from the U.S. elections, presidential elections, to have a conversation with communication specialist Felicity Darville out of Nassau, Bahamas. Welcome, Empress.
Thank you so much, Royal Queen Africa Allah. I am so happy to be here with you. Always wanted to be able to have a sit down and a chat with you and your royal self.
Well, here it is. So, Felicity, first and foremost, let everybody know a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Okay, I am a wife and mother and a Pan-Africanist and a journalist and multimedia specialist in the Bahamas, also having worked on projects in other parts of the region and the United States, dealing with areas like cultural preservation, environmental advocacy, disability affairs advocacy, women's rights and stuff. So much. So journalism and activism has really been my calling for the past 30 years, having worked in mainstream media on broadcast, television, radio, national, and so forth for many years before venturing off on my own with my own mission and mandate.
Now, you said that you have a 30-year span career in journalism. I want to first address that. Tell me a little bit about your experience as a journalist in mainstream media this is primarily in the Bahamas, right?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Yeah, it's
that experience.
It's in the Bahamas, but my work is really spread all across the world with so many projects that I've worked over the span of 3 decades. But for me, it really all started when I was in St. Augustine's College. I remember when I was in grade 10, they asked me, what I thought I was going to be when I grow up for the yearbook, the Beacon. And I said, I'm either going to be a news reporter or an actress. So I actually did a bit of both because I used to do lots and lots of plays when I was much younger, especially with some of the greats like Winston Saunders and Kayla Lockhart Edwards. I mean, the glory days of theater here in the Bahamas. I was a kid, James Catlin and Cookie and Vivica them and all of that. So I got to do the actress part early. And then when I was in grade 11, I had the opportunity to work for the summer at the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas. Because I was president at SAC and my student council and all that, I used to be doing speeches and stuff long time. So it came very easy to me to go on ZNS, grab the mic. And they told me I ended up being the first student in the history of the Broadcasting Corporation that was able to give an actual national report with a back tie in my St. Augustine's College uniform. So that's how it began.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. That's impressive. All right. So you got the journalism bug early. What about journalism made you want to be a part of it?
Yeah.
I know you were already speaking and acting and in front of the spotlight, but what about journalism captured your attention?
I think when I was young and I heard that there was power in the pen, that began one of my first openings into journalism by writing a lot, because I used to write articles. Even though I went to SAC, they would put my articles in bulletin boards in churches, even in the school. St. John's College even had my stuff inside their printouts and stuff for students and what's not. So from an early age, I realized, hey, your message could spread further than you could even think if you could write it on that. Then I started getting into doing TV commercials, and suddenly I realized, wow, media allows you to really touch the world.
When we talk about media in 2024, Gone are the days of print. Print is almost obsolete at this point. The majority of people receive their information in quick snippets and sound bites, right? So it seems like a lot of journalists are forgetting the basis of journalism, which is non-bias reporting, and are reporting for clicks and views. With technology, we have now opened up the field for anybody to be deemed a journalist just because they have a space.
Yeah.
How do you think that technology has affected the way we consume information?
Well, Empress, it really has quickened the pace of how we receive information. And if you don't have on a good filter, you'll be picking up all sorts of low level vibrations, and it can really get you off course, because what happens is when you engage with social media, you're really being emotionally charged, and so sometimes we put emotion above the facts. And so because of that, right, what I did was, after I launched into my own, I left mainstream media because, at the time I was a court and crime correspondent. So just like other journalists, we out there reporting what happened because, that's the fact, that's what happened. And at the time when I decided to leave, there was like already over 150 murders for that year. I was seeing so many dead bodies and going out on the streets covering these events. It was rough, and I just put my hands up. I remember I put my hands up to the Lord and I said, Lord, what can I do? And I heard in a very clear voice, he said, report only good news. And, that meant that I had to stop being a court and crime correspondent, and that was no joke. I'm a mother, children to feed, take care of, plans in life. But, I was obedient. And so I started this True Vision Media Group. And exactly what you're mentioning right now about how we filter this information, because we're getting charged up by false information, we getting fed all kind of, listen, AI is so tricky right now, you don't even know what your eyes are seeing. And the problem is people don't want to do the research. So if you're going to be relying on people for your information, then being trustworthy is like one of the key foundations of being a journalist.
So we're in the U.S. presidential election race, right? And in this race, there are a couple things that are happening. A lot of false information, and Trump not necessarily coined it, but really made this term relevant. Fake news. He says everybody is fake news. ABC is fake news. Everybody's fake news except for Fox. Anybody that coincides with him, right? However, outside of his rhetoric, I think that there is a lot of fake news that is created for clicks and views, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the times journalists do take, I don't really consider them journalists, because the ethics behind journalism has long gone out the window. Where, in the middle of a presidential election, instead of addressing issues and facts,
Right,
or the petition that the person is running on, the platform that the person is running on, they're talking about DIY hires, DIE hires, and ethnicity, and things that don't have any relevance as to how this person is going to do the job.
right. Okay, I glad you.
Mhm. Go ahead.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because if I was an American and I got a vote, right? Why would I not take the time to investigate the facts? My vote. You need to make your vote more special. Your vote should be based not on, once again, going back to emotion and being led by just the information that people are feeding you, but to go and research the information. I agree with Trump, because even Marcus Garvey said that 90% of the world runs on bluff. So even though these people are supposed to be dedicated to bringing you the top information, they also have other objectives, and they are being directed by other people sometimes. So within that, you that doesn't mean that every journalist operating in that institution is like that. But if you do your research, you will find the people whose words you can trust. And even when you find those people, don't forget that you got to do your own research. Make your vote so important that you're going to go and find out about the Electoral Council and how it really affects the votes compared to and let me know what's the difference between the popular vote and the electoral vote. Go back in history and see how the elections have been playing out from the time, go back from Bush and Obama. Go back as far and just a handful of elections, and you will begin to see a pattern emerge. And with that in mind, now you make your vote from an informed place of what is really going to benefit you. Because those are just personalities, Trump and Harris they're just personalities. They're representing parties. What does those parties believe? How are they going to benefit you? And if they're not, then you have to make a conscious vote. So do your research and make your votes count.
Well said. Well said. I was watching a video, and a gentleman who considers himself a journalist said it was a rumor that, and I'm saying to myself, there's a 1,000-page article or piece of paperwork that's out there that goes through Project 2025, as well as there is a separate document that talks about Trump's first 100 days in office. The Democrats also have paperwork as to what their goals are for the first 100 days in office, right? Mm-hmm. So there's no reason for you to say, I heard a rumor.
Right.
You should say, I did the research.
Exactly.
But you're so quick to get your video up or your podcast up or, get eyeballs that you're not paying attention to the information, and you're going off of what you heard, and you want your viewers or people that are on your show to give their opinion without any research.
A whole waste.
Now, granted,
a waste of their time.
Granted, scholarly journals are no longer. I mean, people don't reference scholarly journals anymore. Most of the times when I listen to reports, they don't cite any research as to where this information came from. How you can go back to where it is. The majority of conversations are based on emotion. True. When you are the type of journalism that you do, you said that you do cultural journalism and you do
every kind. I do sports and all.
For the most part, right?
I'm just a writer,
I want to talk about, I want to talk about cultural journalism because I think it's important for us to have our stories, capture our stories, and talk about our stories. How do you go about doing that and staying authentic to whomever it is that you're representing?
That's good. So what I decided to do once I decided to leave mainstream media was to come up with a mission and a mandate. So True Vision Media Group, the initial mandate was getting good news in the news. So the compass for me in order to point north was always, is this good news? Is this beneficial, And because of it, a lot of NGOs who are out there doing great things, feeding people, helping people with illnesses and cancer, the people who are disabled, and all the various groups, all these people who are out there doing good things, they weren't getting their stuff in the news because they were writing them from a public relations perspective. So what I did was I went in with a mantra of doing personal relations. And so I started to tell the stories of these people. Like, for example, one of them that I put in the paper today, Lamar is at the Erin Gilmore School for the Blind, and he has A's on his BJCs. We're so proud of him. But a lot of times when you send this stuff to the media, because here in the Bahamas, there's a lack of resources, for our field in journalism. There's a lack of resources. The pay cannot match their talent, and plus, they're overworking, so therefore they're spreading them thin. They're not getting a chance to really hone in and focus on particular subjects and build their careers around being advocates. And that's why True Vision Media Group combines media with advocacy. And I ended up coming up with a whole charter, a charter for media professionals, right? And so one of the first points is, every time you do report, ask, so what's the good news? If you have to report a murder or a suicide or traffic fatality, give me the hotlines that I need to use to protect me and my family, the law as it pertains to these particular devastating social ills, including human trafficking and child molestation and all the issues that we deal with. Give me the facts, the people I need to go to, who can help me, what exists even on the UN level, the rights that I have, human rights. And so if journalists put that, don't end a report with just telling me, someone else get gunned down. Tell me what to do to help myself get out of this situation. What should we be holding the leaders accountable to in order to live the way that we want to live, that helps prosperity? Because if you don't put yourself in the path to take your own prosperity, you're not going to get it. So you have to pave your own way. And that means that we as journalists have to help people when we do our reports.
The way you phrase a sentence or the words that you use can show bias. How do you use non-biased verbiage in order to relay information when it comes to racially charged stories?
Yeah, that's a good one. We need to be presented with the facts, because I found, and what I've been doing in my work right now is joining more NGOs, government agencies with the media, because we may not know the correct terms. I just give an example. We recently had a Disability Affairs Week, and we had to learn how to say. We are now saying people with disabilities, not disabled persons, and learning what is the language. So if what happened is there's a disconnect in a way, between the fourth estate, the government, all of us have to come together now to say, this is the way that we express ourselves to show respect for humankind. As a matter of fact, Africa, that leads to the next part of the charter, because it's a global charter I did for media professionals. And then this one is for all humanity. And this is how it goes. Our social media responsibility is to have respect for all people. Our community responsibility is to spread good news. Our personal responsibility is to show love and care for ourselves and others. And our global responsibility is each one teach one. And if we reverse it, instead of finding ways to be separate, we will teach each other. Teach these journalists. You're the one who is so active into your particular cause, gender equality, for example. Then provide the media with what they need to be saying and adding on to these stories to provide the proper information. Don't just say, well, it's not happening. How can you teach them? Now, if you see you holding them accountable, you will begin to slowly change the whole environment and atmosphere in the journalism field, and we will once again raise that standard.
I agree. I think that holding people accountable and actually sharing information that is going to make the product more viable and relatable to the persons that they're sending information out to is an important part of the exercise. As a journalist, it's often hard to have conversations with people because you understand language, right?
Yeah.
So different words with different tones and different inclinations, different have different meanings. You can say the same thing and it can be a compliment or it can be an insult, right? With the inflection of your voice.
Okay.
And as a journalist, we often pick up on these things. So having conversations often seem to be trying, or it seems like you're always trying to find the story. With the way things are, and I'm going back to reporting in general, I recently read an article in the Bahamian paper in regards to a gentleman that had sexual relations with a minor. I forgot how they termed it. Um, but the way that it was termed, it would seem that the idea of this relationship was okay because they didn't use harsh words like rape or assault or abuse. I got to go back to that
That one
article.
seems like it might have been more because now the reporter, they only could report whatever the people get charged with. So that actually needs to be taken up with the courts to find out, what, make sure that, people are being, properly sentenced and not trying to slip people in, you know.
Well, when I read the article, it seemed like the article was in favor of the rapist and not the
Wow.
not. Well, it's not okay. For again, and this goes back to me understanding the English language, right? And understanding
Right, right.
words. So the average person is going to read it and say, "Oh, he had unconsensual sex." That's what it was. Unconsensual sex with a minor. And that sounds different from he molested a
Right.
child. But then the product that was brought forth was the headline read 40-year-old man fined for unconsensual sex with a minor he met on Facebook.
Yeah.
So so you automatically know the first part by saying, "Oh, he met her on Facebook."
Yes.
Meaning that you're pardoning this behavior because this person didn't meet each other in person, so they didn't know. But in the article it says that he did this 3
Oh my
times.
goodness.
So you don't think that
Oh,
like
it's
after
really
the
sweet.
first time he knew that was like from on site,
Yeah.
you knew that was not a whatever that was not a
Woman.
that was not a 21-year-old
Exactly.
adult. But again, this is why I say the reporting seems to lack a conscience. Like, report the facts. Don't give me no fluff.
I was having a
You know what I mean?
conversation with my good friend Desmond Saunders. He's a journalist at ZNS just last week, and he was talking about. He said, "Man, these college lecturers, that are teaching journalism also need to, what the impact they have is great too." Because he said he remember when he was going to college, the lecturer always say, "Whatever bleeds leads."
What? Okay. This is in the Bahamas.
No, no,
This
no.
is like a school.
Yeah, he was abroad.
I I don't I the problem that I have with lecturers and professors is that most of them have not worked in the industry.
Wow.
I remember when I was getting my journalism degree from Georgia State, and I went back after my mother had passed. I went back.
Wow.
At this point, I had already worked in radio,
Yes.
TV, and journalism or in print. I was just getting the paperwork.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we're in there and we're having this conversation, and the professor says this thing, and I said, "Well, that's not necessarily written in stone because the reality is things change quickly when you're in that space." And they went on to argue with me that, well, this is what we're teaching and this is the curriculum. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not reality.
That's right.
Like I've like I've had stories come in and we've had to change whole layouts as a result of something that's hot right now and we have to get that done. You know, the the things that they're teaching are not practical because that's not the real world. And I've come to realize that the professors, they're only going off of the stuff that's written in books, and again, they're teaching off of their assumptions and
It's a
opinions,
serious
not
disconnect.
necessarily what's happening.
Yes. And they affecting the future of these people, and they affect the future of the world. You know, one of the things you
Right.
mentioned about, one of the things we talk about when we talk about how they say, this bad news headlines sell. That's an old narrative, because good headlines sell, and this is how I know. If you go on social media, most of the posts that you come across, when you look in the comments, there are dozens of positive comments. Positive media is more impactful. And so that's why I decided to invest in it, and, to carve this way. And I went from the motto, getting good news in the news, and basically just, covering the news of all these NGOs and youth groups and culture groups, etc., to moving on to global advocates for positive media, where I want to share this charter, with media professionals and with everybody who uses the media, because now media there's a difference between a professional journalist and, people who are in the media, because anyone can be a media star. That's how the world has evolved.
Sharing your information with the world. Recently, I had a conversation in regards to media and storage of media or archiving of media, because our media today is our history tomorrow,
Yes.
which a lot of people don't understand.
Mhm.
So when we cover things, we're not only covering information for right now, we are essentially archiving the history of our people
Wow.
as we present it in the present.
Amen. That was so good. I had to write that down.
You're free to
Yeah.
use that.
No, and I will give credit, because I remember, I never forget when we first started talking about, doing this podcast. One of the things you asked me about was my archiving. I'm like, listen, I said, Africa, I'm out there archiving for everybody, and you told me to start archiving for myself. And actually, I did. I actually put something up on Facebook, True Vision Media Group, and I started putting my articles there. But I mean, when I thought back about 30 years, this is maybe tens of thousands of stories.
I'm glad you said that. So MTV just recently disconnected from the internet. Like, MTV News has gone. They're obsolete. They're decimated, right? But that goes back to that makes you think how easy it is to erase an entire
Crazy.
history or culture
Wow.
of people, right?
Yeah.
How are we to believe? So let me go back. One of the things that always inspired me, I think it was a lyric from CeeLo Green off of the Still Standing album, and he said, "My words will be immortalized through wax CDs and cassettes," right? And that was it for me. Like, at the time, I was at the early stages of my education in communication,
Right.
and that was the reason. That was the. I don't care. That is yes, it's vanity. My reasoning for being in journalism and entertainment, predominantly entertainment, was that I knew I wasn't worried about the right now. I was worried about my legacy.
Wow.
I've always been very legacy driven because my family suffers from cancer.
Wow.
And I've seen so many people die
Oh my
early.
goodness.
So my thing has always been, I want something that is going to last a lifetime, so that if I'm not here, my message can still get out.
Oh, I'm so proud of you.
And
That's amazing.
when I heard that verse, like, that easily became my favorite song. I played that all the time because it was just a mantra.
Oh, I was just thinking mantra. I feel you.
And as I've lived through 4 decades of communication. I was a part of the early introduction of the internet and computer science. We've lived through. Remember when LimeWire and all these other things were considered to be pirating, and now it's the norm. Streaming is the norm.
Yes. That's amazing.
When
Pioneer.
podcasting was only audio and now it's video, people will assume that it's video.
Yes.
When we had CDs and 3/4 inch and 8 millimeters, all of these things are obsolete. I had tapes and tapes of events like Freaknik, Black College Weekend, all of these things on tape, where I went out and interviewed people and talked about whatever was going on culturally. I remember traveling to New Orleans and Texas and Tennessee, interviewing rappers for my final for college, my video production final for college, doing interviews, hosting hip hop talk shows, like all of these things on 3/4 inch. 3/4 inches, like 3/4 inches after beta, but before 8 millimeter, right? So they don't exist no more. There's no way to get There's no way to get that stuff, right? And then CDs and cassettes and DVDs, all these things that we were burning information on, and none of these things are accessible in this era of technology. So how are we, after experiencing, and this is only 40 years, this is 4 decades, only 40 years, how are we to believe that the content that we are creating right now will be accessible? Exactly. And how easy is it for our culture, our stories to be erased from the world? I recently had a friend of mine contact some people in the Bahamas to find video and audio proof of my contribution to Bahamian journalism and media, only to find that none of the tapes are there. None of the audio had been saved. Right. So my entire existence in media in the Bahamas predominantly is erased. So I only can go off of people that either knew of me or people that hired me, right? And those people are dying every day. Culturally, people like MDs and Fooda and all these people that were a part of the entertainment culture in the Bahamas, their stories are no longer here because of poor management of archives, or the foresight to make these things, to store these things outside of these big corporations. Now, one of the things about working for a company, and this is a lot of the journalists from MTV and people that have put in their life's work at these organizations, right? When this happened, like nobody would expect a major conglomerate like Viacom to just delete 40 years of culture. That's 40 years of culture. And that's music culture, that's urban culture. All of that is just culture. With all of that being said, it is important that we think about storage. How are we archiving our products outside of the internet, which at some point these platforms, because the reason why they're free is because they make money off of you. Once they can't make money off of you, they're going to start charging you,
Yeah.
right? Because they're making money off of your information. So once they can't make money off of your information anymore, they're going to start charging you.
Exactly.
$3, $4, $5, $10, whatever the fee is,
Exactly.
right? With all of the content and things that you consume, you're going to have to then choose what is valuable. And if that is not making you money, then it's more than likely that you're not going to invest that type. You're not going to invest $10 a month. It sounds like a little bit, but when you have 4 or 5 different things taking out $10 a month, it becomes cumbersome.
Yes.
Saving your articles to Facebook, a free product, saving it to your website, a product that you pay for, and saving it to a hard drive, something that you have in your possession and you can reference. Those things are things that you have to make investments in.
Yes, ma'am.
If you were to die today, and I always bring this up because I bring this up with my clients. If you were to die today, would people be able to access your information, update your archives, continue to pay for the platforms that host your content, and actively distribute things that you have contributed to the culture?
That's what everybody got to think about. All the greatest of us.
But we don't.
Yes.
Because we're so busy documenting and producing and creating that we don't think about
Archiving,
like archiving to me is like retirement and burial funds.
Love it. That's so true.
Where people, because you know, when we do the research and we see all of these things, right? These are paper. The one thing that seems to not be obsolete, and even though, you know, children can't write or read or speak, paper and images, drawings, illustrations. This is how we know about the past, because they're in books.
Yes.
Those things, no matter how much eight decks or eight tracks, cassettes, wax, DVDs, CDs, streaming, all of that stuff. No matter how much of these things they have, when you go back to it, the thing that we always reference is the printed archives, because those are the things that are accessible and don't change over periods of time.
True.
The written word. So how do we get back? So how do we preserve the history, the stories of right now for the history of tomorrow?
So one of the first ways, you know, from the beginning of time, the oral word was always, you know, oral history is extremely valuable, and it's the first in the beginning was the word. And so that is why my whole mantra of spreading good news is so important, because if we need to be given the right information, and we need to create the right narratives that support our goals. And so the first thing is, if you're a professional journalist or anyone in media, get that narrative in your own head and then get that message out, because once you could do it for yourself, it becomes even more meaningful when you do it with others. And then the second, of course, as Africa said, is the written word. And like right now, I actually have on the side of me where a laminator, where I started laminating my newspaper stories, so that even though they're on the internet, and even though I have a drive, I still take the hard newspaper and cut it out, laminate it, or I print the PDF and laminate it. Because, we live in a hurricane belt, and during Hurricane Francis and Jean, I had a lot of my newspaper clippings in a waterproof bag. But Hurricane Francis came, but Hurricane Jean ended up coming the next week after, and that's when the water ended up going above
Yeah.
the electrical. The water was like 3/4 in the way because we had to evacuate. So that's when we really lost everything. So I ended up saying, you know what, and I just started doing it. I tell you, Africa, you were inspiring when we had that talk about archiving, and I got a laminator at a patio sale for $5, and I've been here laminating these stuff, girl.
It's important for us. It's important for us to archive and document our culture. I've always felt that. I've always felt that the main objective is to document the culture, because while it may not make you an abundance of money right now, it will be a part of the history of who we are.
It
And
is
I think it's
priceless.
important that people that look like us need to control the narrative,
Yes.
because all of the art, all of the stories that I hear, listen, let me tell you how people change your culture and your history and your story. 2024 Olympics breakdancing
Uh
competition.
huh.
That is a perfect example of how
Yes.
people change the origin of a
Yes. They
story.
write their own narrative. Because we didn't do our, because we didn't do it
2024
ourselves.
2024 marks 51 years of the hip hop culture.
Wow.
But you know what will be archived and remembered?
That breakdancing by the Olympics.
Oh, God.
Because we didn't do it
Wait,
ourselves, and that's the whole point.
no, we didn't.
We and then we operate two separately. We don't understand. We have to learn to become one living, breathing organism. Once, that's why I'm trying to say that a global charter is so important, because see, if everybody be on the same page and understand this is the narrative when it comes to these specific topics, we will be mighty. That's why, Marcus Garvey, once again, I guess with his birthday coming up in the 4 days, in the next 4 days, I'm just feeling him. But he say, up you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. Reach for the stars of equality and justice. And then I love how he said, equality and justice stand for all. And that's what really brings us together in the media, when we learn to respect each other, because we all have human rights. We may not all agree, we may not be all on the same path, but we have to respect each other's human rights, because equal rights and justice stand for all.
We are quickly running into the hour point, but there's some things that I definitely like. We've been talking about your company for the last few for most of the show, right? I want to know from you, how has taking control of your message changed the way you engage and interact with other entities, or quote unquote professional entity, quote unquote, was it professional and national entities?
Right. Africa really, even though, I say a company, I am really a professional with a company, because as I met a lot more entrepreneurs, I realized that, hey, entrepreneurs, they millionaires, so it's them I want to learn from. But my company is beginning to grow because I started to redefine who I am. Instead of just looking at myself as someone who is helping all of these people, I realized if I cannot help myself, I cannot help them. And so, therefore, that very same initial divine inspirational moment I had, where I got the word to get good news in the news, that's how that is why I decided to define myself as someone who could help to guide others to also be more cognizant about putting positivity out there, and not making positivity like it ain't cool. Let's start celebrating these young people. We got a back to school edition in the paper today. And I mean, we have, like I mentioned, the young man who's blind, but we have young nurses who just graduated. We have the largest maritime graduates in the history so far for LJM. This is the kind of news we want to. This is the kind of news we want to share. We want to make it cool to show show the world, hey, this is who we really are, and this the narrative that we're promoting. Now, how do I transition that when you say into various spaces? What's happening now is, because I really did it from the heart, when I start to go inside these governmental spaces, international conferences spaces, and corporations and companies, now, because I've been putting my heart into it for 16 years, it is now evolving into a company where I have a videographer and a graphic artist and so forth who could take on big projects. Because had I just come out and say, I can start this business and I'm going to do it. I mean, some people might succeed that way, but that was not my path. My path really came from authentically just following the Lord's command. That's how it really started. I was just like other journalists out there working for the dollar, but at the same time, you have to be still withholding to the directives that the people who own these corporations want. And it doesn't mean you're not good people. You're always like, we are the most talented cadre of people. But if we don't create our own spaces to write our own narratives, when we go on these international platforms and other platforms, we can't really, be authentic as we would want. So, start with the heart. Always go back to the center and do it from the heart. If your thing is really finance, or if your thing is really agriculture, like the lady I wrote about today, she owns the only organic farm in the Bahamas. It's a neem farm, Daphne Myolis, her and her husband Nick. They own a neem farm. It's the only certified organic farm in the Bahamas. And you know what this lady said? She said, without agriculture, you have no culture. And I was like, I never thought of that before. I always think of culture in a different context, but for real, because if ain't no food, ain't nobody coming. So begin to find your lane and begin to be authentic in that, because you like that. And you'll find that you could branch out from these corporations, because if they're really suiting the same directives which you have, you will end up, for example, during the biggest elections coming up, not being able to cover it how you want. So transition into creating your own spaces and make good news, the popular thing.
I loved everything that you said. You echoed my sentiments to the T. I've always thought that it's important to cover the news, whether it is in your favor or not. Cover the news, cover what's happening, and debate the pros and the cons. Weigh the pros and the cons in your production of your coverage, because sometimes when we go out here, like you said, the big election is coming up in your country, and we know that a lot of entities are financially backed by certain people or get certain lenience with certain things, right? And this is not an allegation. This is just, we understand that things happen. Like, money has to come from somewhere. Yeah. And a lot of times the people that have the money have certain affiliations and require certain things. So it's not necessarily falsely reporting the news, but omitting certain information, right? And as a fresh, brand new journalist, you're like, I want to tell the story and bring the news to people. And then you get in there and you realize it's all this red tape. And you have an editor that X's out words. And you're like, but when you work for yourself,
exactly,
and you have the ability to put out that information, it's different.
Yes.
So that was my appeal to taking my talents online.
Wow. You ever been a pioneer? Always. I've always known that about you. You know what I mean? You carve your own lane. You didn't need to, be withholding to the dictates of others and how, they wanted you to express yourself and to be able to really promote, music and culture the way that you have.
But that also comes with a price, though.
Exactly.
Those things come with a
Yeah.
price. You know, when you think about your career, you see journal, and again, that's vanity and ego, right? You see people being celebrated. You see people ascending to these positions of authority, and you're like, wow, my career could have been so much
True,
different.
true, true. Very true.
But again, you remember that your words will be immortalized for decades to come, and you are part of history.
Yes.
It changes. That now is a part of your purpose and not your ego. So the purpose, again, I applaud you for your purpose-driven contributions to culture and the preservation of historical facts for people beyond our generation to be able to experience. Thank you for your contributions.
Thank you so much. We must always, Africa, remain to be students, and we must always read. As journalists, reading is so important. Right now, I got a book in the front of me called Black Rinse by Christopher Davis, Jean Paul II, and it's a new perspective on the history of the African diaspora in the Bahamas. And I'm reading that, as well as Rex Nettleford from UWI's From the Heart articles, as well as I just came from the AFREXIM conference and looking at African trade and Caribbean trade. So what happened now as journalists, I know it's a lot that we do, but you still have to find time to read. See, what makes it easier is when you find your own lane. Find something that you're passionate about and stick with that subject, and you'll find that you'll become so well versed in that subject, that it will take you to heights beyond even what you're experiencing now. Just keep putting the good news out there, things that it's going to make yourself proud and make your contribution to the world that much more powerful.
There you have it. This has been Being Africa Live right here on Discover Music Channel by Playmass.today alongside Felicity Darville. Felicity, please let people know how they can check out your work and get in contact with you.
Okay, even just Google me and you will find lots of stories, but you can find me on Facebook, True Vision Media Group. That's the name of it, Global Advocates for Positive Media. Or you can look for Felicity Darville across all your social media platforms. Or you can WhatsApp me at 466-4763 or email me at felicitydarville@gmail.com.
Now make sure you say that number again with a 242 in front
242, area code 242-466-4763.
All right, until next week, this is Being Africa Live right here on Discover Music Channel.
Love you, Africa.